All right, and there's the ham, as has been requested from folks. It's been a relatively peaceful weekend, unlike real reInvent most years, where they wind up hurling things at us at reckless abandon. I have a friend on to join us today to go through the announcements from his side of the world, Randy from Cloud Tamer, not to be confused with Cloud Neighbor, which is something that AWS does terribly. Randy, how have you been?
I've been doing well, thanks. How about yourself?
Oh, can't complain too loudly. Mostly, I want to hear what your thoughts are on what we've seen coming out from AWS so far, what we're hoping to see in the remaining 2 interminable weeks of reInvent, and also they recently announced there's going to be 3 more days of reInvent in January. Why? Because Amazon hates us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's certainly been an interesting time as you're talking about here, having to spread out these different announcements over the course of such a long period. I feel like normally it's kind of drinking from a fire hose, and now we get to do that for 3 full weeks plus another 3 days in January, which is great. But from our side here, I think we've seen a number of announcements around different services that have been particularly interesting for us to identify a little bit about what's in AWS's head, right? I know that before the conference, there's been a lot of talk around multi-cloud and seeing kind of what some of those announcements look like. But I think we've seen some particularly interesting things around some of their new service launches, like Service Catalog App Registry. Just to name one thing out there that's piquing our interest.
Yeah, one thing that I do want to highlight as well is please use the chat, throw things in. Someone just commented that I can't complain too loudly, but yet that's literally all I do. Not true. If I complain too loudly, I blow out the volume levels and it sounds clipped. We wouldn't want that. So tell me a little bit more about Service Catalog App Registry, because I look at it and it seems like it's trying to stand in the same basic place in the universe that 4 or 5 other AWS services are, showing that their greatest competition appears to be internal.
Yeah, definitely. I think for us, the interesting thing is kind of a multi-cloud governance or management tool, right? Focused on the multi-account model, is that AWS is clearly, at least seemingly clearly, seeing that those that have the kind of single account, multi-tenant, or running multiple environments in a single account are looking for some sort of tools to help organize that workflow a little bit more. I think for kind of being able to categorize different environments or assets associated with different environments in a relatively easy way is sort of the first step toward organizing, right? You organize your sock drawer, you put all the colors together, the sweat socks, the dress socks, whatever, before you can start actually putting in a system, if you will. And so I think that's certainly one of the things that we've pulled out of that, that speaks close to home here at Cloud Tamer.
Yeah, and it's sort of a weird time to have this conversation on some level. They haven't talked about anything that really ties back to a lot of developer workflow stuff, et cetera. So either there's more announcements to come, or they've decided just to cede all thought leadership this year to Google. We'll find out over the next week and a half. But I'm optimistic that they'll continue to improve things that help customers across the board here. I'm a big fan of an awful lot of what they do. Despite the ridiculous subservice naming, I think that systems manager is something people take far too lightly. But to your end, talking about the idea of a multi-cloud model, I think that's something that everyone is really hoping for on some level. I want to be able to spin up some sort of ephemeral account that you can do whatever you want in, and it doesn't matter. 3 weeks from now, it's getting blown out and everything in it. There's no automated way to do that right now. Someone in the Twitch chat just said AWS organizations. Cool, that or Control Tower, because apparently those are 2 completely separate orgs, and ne'er between shall meet. It's AWS has tried to do an awful lot of stuff, but they've been very forthcoming about the fact that they are learning from their customers. The problem is that a lot of those customers now who are getting into this are asking for guidance. This is a one-way door. How do I set up my account structure so I don't regret it 6 months from now?
Yeah, I think this reminds me of a Twitter conversation I joined this weekend around the old adage when people move to cloud is treat your compute as cattle and your storage as pets, right? Make them just ephemeral, as you were talking about. And I think one of the points of this Twitter thread was essentially around the idea that AWS says go multi-account, put every developer, every environment, everything into its own account, but don't really give you the tools to handle that effectively. And so, this Twitter thread was actually talking about treating the account as cattle, which, as a platform designed around making multi-account easier, right? That speaks volumes. I really like that. I love that idea. If you can automate the account creation, automate, or as close as you can automate the decommissioning of it. Yeah, absolutely. Just get what you need out of it and move on to the next one, right? It would be a fantastic option.
We're also seeing things that start to speak toward that. Aurora V2 serverless is a good example, where historically, whenever you have to spin up a baseline environment, when every ephemeral account winds up having $300 of resources living in it, and every developer gets 6 of them,
Yep.
it starts to add up and get a little
Yep.
spendier. So seeing an actual Aurora serverless that has a better economic model, as well as patches itself in a bit better to this model of only pay for what you use, I'm kind of excited about that once I get to play with it. I don't know if it's been announced only in preview or if it's available yet. Lord knows during the 3 weeks of waterboarding, it's not, it's the joy of reInvent. It's not a fire hose, it's being waterboarded slowly and painfully by your cloud provider. I haven't had time to play with virtually any of these things yet, but I'm hopeful that this
Exactly.
it winds up being a valuable step on that path.
Yeah, we've actually, so that's Aurora Serverless V2 is particularly interesting to us. We're not SaaS. We install directly into a customer's AWS account or Azure subscription or whatever it may be. And our backend runs on Aurora. And so, as a tool that's bringing in financials, right, when those get released twice a day, we have some serious bursts that I think we could take advantage of the new Aurora serverless there to process that financial data, spread it out across all of those accounts in those large customer environments. And so we joined the beta, which it's definitely still in beta to the point where you can't look at an existing cluster yet and just kind of migrate it over. It doesn't see the things that are running on traditional Aurora RDS right now. So definitely exciting, but it's not it's not fully baked yet.
Yeah, I tend to take the beta label seriously when it comes from AWS as opposed to aspirationally, such as when it comes from Google. When they wind up talking about something in beta, very often any data in that is going to be deleted and shut down when it gets ready for becoming generally available. So it's great for proving out concepts, terrible for things you actually care about in terms of data store for an excellent series of reasons. What else have you found that's
Yeah.
been of interest for you?
Yeah, I think the following your adage here of convert your GP2 to GP3 now, right? Get that 20% savings. We were super excited to do that and see. And since then, I think that there's been a Reddit post and some Twitter posts, but we certainly had an interesting scare here when one of our engineers did a GP2 to GP3 on something that had like 75 cents or $1 worth of EBS spend. And when we looked that next morning, we were at, I think, $8,000 in spend there on that volume, and I think before AWS support got to it, we were over $400,000. So that was nuts.
Yeah, we had something very similar where we did a series of small experiments with a GP3 volume and throughput adjustments. And hey, watch out. Turns out that can be expensive with this 1 hour experiment costing us $4,000. Doing the math out, great. So every 10 gigabyte volume that we have, if we provision it a little differently, is going to cost us $2.8 million a month. Well, I guess it only really has to work once and then AWS can go and retire. But in practice, no, it's a billing error where it's off by about a factor of a million, and they are fixing this. It will
Yep.
scare the hell out of you
Yep.
in the console. It's not going to show up in your actual bill at the end of the month, so they tell us.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
think one of
it
the
drives home the lesson of whenever they release something new, the first thing you should always make sure to look at is the pricing page, because there are corner cases and edge cases where it would actually cost that much, and then you have to bend the knee and beg for forgiveness.
I blame you personally because you thanked the AWS billing team and engineers earlier this week. So I'm going to say it's your fault.
Absolutely. What scared the heck out of me was not the $4,000 that we were being charged, but rather the how much apologizing across the internet am I going to have to do for recommending GB3 as a best practice? Do it now. Yeah, that didn't look so good as long as that billing was accurate. It's not. By all means, go GP3 across the board for God's sake. But it's a
Yeah.
great enhancement. I love it. I'm kind of wondering what the point of GP2 is and will it be effectively deprecated? It should be. You don't have burst balance
Yeah.
anymore to worry about, and it's just across the board a win for customers.
Yeah, I think one of the scary things is, so one of the functions of our platform is not just to kind of align your cloud spending with budgets, but to actually enforce that. And so, similar to like when AWS just released the AWS budget actions, where you can take action based off of that. When that billing report came in and showed $400,000, we triggered all kinds of things, right? I know in one of our demo environments, we froze all the accounts from standing up something new in there. We put like a freeze rule in across IAM. Thankfully, we didn't have some sort of like nuclear destruction thing, but when you're expecting your demo environment to have a few dollars a month of spend, and then all of a sudden you have a $400,000 bill in overnight, things could have gone really wrong.
Yeah, you can get that high legitimately, but it takes a little bit of doing to get there.
Exactly.
Incidentally,
Yeah.
speaking of fun surprises, there was some customers have been alerted that there's a potentially degraded service in one of the Frankfurt facilities because there's a government mandate to evacuate it based upon a recently discovered piece of World War II ordnance. I'm not entirely sure that that's what AWS means when they talk about blast radius, but at the same time, I wouldn't A, argue the point, or B, really blame AWS for this. At some point, we found an actual bomb sort of supersedes what you're expecting for your provider to be able to handle. I mean, it is Amazon, so if any company can wind up handling this, they have drones, let's use one. But I'm willing to
Yep.
cut them a fair bit of slack for that.
Yeah, and I'm assuming, should that bomb have gone off, they would have blamed customers for not developing an application that spans multi-region, right?
And that's one of the problems I have, where when they take an outage like we saw with Kinesis 2 weeks ago now,
Yep.
and it's, well, you really should have rolled out some apps in a multi-region way if they were that important. Great, following what blueprint? Very few of AWS services span that way themselves. And telling customers, oh, go and worry about it on your own, leads people down a very dark path. Where's the template? Where's the demo that winds up showcasing and highlighting exactly what that looks like? How do I do that with a toy application? Otherwise, it's the step one, draw 2 circles. Step two, draw the rest of the freaking owl. That's not fair to
Right.
customers, and I don't think it's a realistic assessment of where things are from just a sheer perspective of customer maturity. There have to be better examples because the dark secret is no one knows how to build a world-spanning hyperscale application until they've done it. And AWS is talking a good game about providing the resources, but an awful lot of that management stuff is undifferentiated heavy lifting, and we need guideposts on how to get there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that makes complete sense. I think, I guess I'm curious to kind of turn it back to you a little bit too. What have you been excited about recently?
Ugh, that's a good one. I'm going to punt on that for a second because someone in the chat wound up saying that those are what the Netflix sessions at reInvent are about. I'm going to challenge you on that because realistically, I get the sense based upon previous talks I've seen by Netflix folks, the real thrust of those talks is often that's not how we do it at Netflix, with an entire point of making people feel ashamed and a little bit sad about how they're actually doing things rather than how they should aspirationally do things if they worked at Netflix. I periodically yell at people for that one. No, I'm not planning to show up on pigtails, but that's an excellent idea also in the chat. And as far as things that I've seen that excite me, I was very optimistic about Code Guru supporting Python because that's a language that I write badly. And then I shoved 1,000 lines into Code Guru and it didn't find a single thing. So the question of is it working or is it broken means that in my terrible 1,000 lines of Python, great, what am I going to, is it actually working? Is it good? Is my code way better than I thought and I should expect a job right now from AWS? I don't know. I will point out that Code Guru lives in the machine learning segment, not developer tools segment, which means it charges a whole bunch of money for uncertain results that are of course not replicable, but it didn't thrill me. So the promise, great. The execution needed some work.
Maybe it's just automatically taking your Python code, running it through some machine learning and making it perfect for you. Or just,
I'm going to take it a step further.
Yeah.
Based upon what I'm doing, based on what I saw, it winds up having a sleep function for 300 seconds or so and a pull request, and then return the commenting, looks good to me, ship it without ever having looked at the code. So that's my job. And now they found a way to wind up doing that automatically. So I'm optimistic that it'll improve, but I want to see some more data on it. I want to see it get into the wild. And I'm sorry, I don't write things in Java, so looking at those historical customers doesn't help me in any meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving out, one thing as well that I've, sorry, go ahead. No, please, after you. All right. I think that the S3 consistency is a huge deal. We're going to go back and forth cross-talking. I'm going to take over. Why not? My name on the stream. We're rolling with it. The problem that I see, that I love, is that they're coming out with this new idea for S3 consistency. And everyone's talking about, what about cap theorem? It's great. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that unlike Google Spanner, they're not coming out saying that it violates cap theorem. They're just not saying anything about it at all. I love the fact that I can now write something consistently and globally to S3 and not have that wind up with inconsistent state like I used to before. And that's huge for a lot of customers doing data analytics workloads. But for those customers, it's transformative. For everyone else, it feels like it's interview trivia. And I don't think there's any real way to cross those two bridges.
Yeah, I think from an S, like where that relates back to us, where we've seen is that what the way in which we get our financials is connecting up to a customer's cost usage report or detailed billing report. And so a lot of customers who purchase the resellers will have some sort of an S3 replication of those cost usage reports. And if whatever those resellers set up in order to do that replication, if it was a script or if it was just a native S3 replication, right? If that would ever fail, these customers would in turn not have updated financials, which in turn could miss some of those enforcement actions we talked about earlier. So I think that particular one is exciting just in terms of redundancy and resiliency for us.
What are the problems with the idea of catching these things programmatically? Oh, you just turned something on, time to turn it off. Is there's a 8 to 12 hour, optimistically, window between someone doing something and it shows up in the bill. Now, while it's great to catch that rather than letting it run all month, as we've demonstrated with some particular API calls, that becomes super expensive super quickly. And by the time you've caught it, that $3 a month developer environment has just cost you 20 grand. So I'd love to see things that are better at intercepting that. But from a technical basis, I'm somewhat skeptical they'll be able to get there. Even CloudTrail is still what, 20 minutes and change as far as so an API call happens and it shows up in the logs?
Yeah, we certainly try to do our best there to catch that. The way in which Cloud Tamer is architected is it's all microservices, and so one of those microservices is actually a spend puller where we go in and we try to catch EC2 instances, RDS clusters, things more popular services that are expensive, and we're actually scanning for that every sort of 5 minutes. We see that those get stood up. We look at kind of their instance sizes or whatever they may be, compare it to kind of the pricing API, and we forecast that out. And with that exact thing in mind is that I think when we were building Cloud Tamer, we did an experiment around how much you could realistically spend sort of between billing reports. And as more and more of the services launch, every day nowadays during the waterboarding known as reInvent, that number only continues to grow, and so that's sort of why we built that mechanism into the platform.
Doesn't it on some level feel like you're sort of in an arms race between trying to support new features and enhancements, and then AWS gets around to doing the same thing that you're offering natively, and it's a bit of a back and forth story as far as like it feels like a long enough timeline. It's a losing game on some level, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that fits with what you were talking about in sort of your partner keynote rebuttal, right? Is that they have to play this game of look, we're friends until we're competitors, and so that's obviously what drives us to go more and more multi-cloud. We've been we launched as AWS. We brought on Azure just over a year ago, and we're bringing in Google right now as we speak. And with that idea is that we know that AWS will get to certain things soon, but how quickly will they then extend that across other cloud providers? I guess we'll see here with the rumors that came out of this reInvent, but it's certainly one thing I think you always have to watch out for, right? Is the big guy might eat you kind of thing.
Yeah, there are a few things coming up on the schedule they've been emailing about. Their emails have been interesting. At the end of week one, they had these are the most highly viewed sessions across the entire thing. It included the keynotes and the leadership sessions. Like you look at that and it was so blindingly obvious. You just know someone spent $50,000 on a machine learning model to tell us all of that thing. This
Yeah.
week, they've got some stuff coming up. Tonight, you have Andy Jassy's doing his whole evening at reInvent thing with special guest Brandy Carlisle. I swear, if they do a duet, I'm closing the stream. I don't care about anything else. And then tomorrow, of course, there's the machine learning keynote, which, well, let's just say that I have a healthy amount of skepticism, and I'll be bringing my A snark game to that. Any hopes, thoughts, things you're hoping to see, hoping not to see?
I mean, I'm always hoping not to see that the thing that you just mentioned, right? With the point at which AWS catches up and releases it directly competing with our features. I feel like that's just an always hoping for. But I mean, I'm excited to see what they bring. In Cloud Tamer, we sort of try to take what cloud providers build and extend that and make it easy. If there's anything we know is that AWS is going to name the service poorly, and it's going to have probably not a very good UI or UX, right? And so if we can, our motto is make people's lives easier in the cloud, right? If we can bring that to a new service and extend that out across multiple organizations or multiple master payers or whatever they may be, I'm happy to do so. That's exciting.
Yeah, and we can also expect it will have mediocre at best CloudFormation support, if that. It's also presumed that they're probably going to come out with something that is not aware of multiple accounts and or multiple regions. It feels like you can't ever get both of those in the same initial release. And I mean, I beat up AWS a lot for these things, but it's incredibly frustrating when it's one of those do as I say, not as I do moments. That's, if on some level, it just feels like it hurts customers more than it helps.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
So, if people want to hear more about what you have to say as we wind up going through this entire event, I'm thrilled to hear where people can find you. And also, someone wants us to make fun of open source. So, if you can do both in the same question, go for it.
Yeah, so it's tough. So open source, I think, is interesting because we've actually moved into bringing in open source into our platform in some ways. We natively baked in Cloud Custodian project, and it's been both a blessing and a curse. I think we found its limitations quickly, right? When we've taken that and we've kind of slapped an enterprise software around it and delivered that, we found some of the shortcomings and can fix those. But to answer the other question about where you can find me, so one, I'm excited. I'll be back here again. But two, as our name suggests, cloudtamer.io is our website. We'd be happy to talk more and dig into these services a little bit as well as our platform.
Excellent. Randy, thank you so much for spending the time to suffer my slings, arrows, and sarcasm. And everyone who's tuned in for this, thank you so much for listening. It's appreciated. We'll be doing more in-depth discussions once there's new stuff to talk about. But when we did the schedule, we sort of assumed there would be a steady drumbeat, not a bunch of announcements that no one can keep up with one day and then radio silence for 3 more. This red light, green light thing has been a bit of a challenge, but we're working with it. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch up with you soon.